Today we're talking about Barry Marshall, the mad scientist doctor who looked at a glass of bacteria and said, "Down the hatch," and changed medical history forever. So, back in 1951, Barry Marshall is born in the rugged mining town of Kalgoorlie, Australia. Now, Barry's dad was a pipe fitter and his mom was a sandwich maker and said, "Maybe we don't want our kids growing in a mining pit, yeah?" So a few years later, they moved to Perth, where Barry goes to school, and Barry's a pretty smart kid, just not that smart. Let's just say he wasn't winning any math bees. Originally, Barry thought he would be an electrical engineer, probably hoping to invent some mind-bending future techs, but the college looked at his math grades and was like, nope, you go now. So Barry shrugs and says, alright, guess I'll go to medical school instead, because who doesn't want their doctor to be a guy whose career choice was, well, planet didn't work. So Barry goes to med school and learns the way of doctoring, and along the way he meets a psychology student named Adrian, his future wife. Adrian ends up being his main editor and PR agent throughout his career. Fast forward a bit, Barry's working at the Royal Perth Hospital. First he's training in cardiology, but one day he's reassigned to gastroenterology, and this is where he meets this pathologist named Dr. J. Robin Warren. Now Warren's a guy who spends his days looking through a microscope at pieces of people. One day, Warren notices something weird in a bunch of stomach biopsies. There are these little squiggly bacteria. Nobody else cares cause everyone's like, bacteria in the stomach? Nah, stomach acid would have killed them. But Warren's not so sure. Then Barry comes in and Warren's like, "Hey, check out these twisty little dudes." And Barry's looking at the slides like, wait a sec, what if these are the actual guys that are causing stomach ulcers? Now at the time, everyone's pretty set on what they think cause ulcers. Stress, spicy food, bad vibes, etc. The idea that bacteria could be the problem is like telling people that fairies cause cavities. But Barry, he's got a gleam in his eyes and a plan forming in his head. So Barry and Warren started collecting samples, taking notes and studying the heck out of these patients. And sure enough, all these folks with stomach ulcers, they've got Helicobacter pylori hanging out in their stomach. To Barry, it's obvious, these twisty bacteria are the culprit. But when he takes his findings to the medical community, they're like, okay Barry, we're gonna need you to stop with these sci-fi theories because everyone knows ulcers are caused by stress and maybe an extra spicy tacos. Barry's out here with rock solid data showing that almost every ulcer patient has this bacteria, and still, no one buys it. They think he's wasting his time, so he's running around presenting his research at conferences, showing slides, waving paper around, and everyone's just looking at him like, wow, this guy is obsessed with stomach bacteria, someone get him a hobby. So now it's 1984, Barry's desperate. He tried data, he tried presentation, and none of it worked. At this point, any sane person would just give up. But it's not Barry. Barry has an idea. It's a bad idea, but it's an idea. He decides that if nobody believes him, he would just prove it by drinking a glass of bacteria. Yep, Barry takes a culture of H. pylori, gives it a swirl, and chugs it. Now you might be thinking, Barry, what are you doing? That's gonna be terrible for you. And you're right. Barry's out here practicing medicine on himself like he's the world's least sensible guinea pig. So Barry's sitting there after drinking this bacteria cocktail, just waiting. Within days, the symptoms starts kicking in. He gets nauseous, his stomach cramps, vomiting, he's feeling rough. At this point, he's probably thinking, I've messed up a little. But here's the thing, Barry's also thrilled because his stomach lining is doing exactly what he thought it would. He's got gastritis, the classic inflammation that kicks off when H. pylori gets into the stomach. He goes in for a follow-up endoscopy and bam, his stomach lining is inflamed and there's H. pylori all over the place. At this point, Barry's like, look, I'm practically dying here, but I was right. So he starts on antibiotics and in no time, he's cured. Barry has literally given himself an infection, trashed his own stomach, and then cured it just to prove that H. pylori causes ulcers. Now if that isn't dedication to science, I don't know what is. His whole self-infection stunt finally gets people's attention. Barry publishes his findings and doctors around the world start taking note. Other researchers begin running trials and patients with ulcers are actually getting tested for H. pylori. By the early 90s, it's official. The medical world accepts that H. pylori is behind most stomach ulcers. No more blaming it on stress or spicy food. In 1995, Barry gets the Lasker Award, which is like the Oscar of medical research. 10 years later, he and Warren wins the Nobel Prize. That's right, Barry went from being a crazy guy downing bacteria shots to having a Nobel Prize around his neck. Not bad for a guy who basically started his career as a human version of a science experiment. So what's Barry up to now? Well, he's still around, he's still talking about H. pylori, and he's still kind of a legend. Thanks to him, if you got an ulcer, you don't have to sit there avoiding salsa for the rest of your life. life. You could just get tested, take some antibiotics, and call it a day. So next time you think about the sacrifices people have made for science, just remember, bury down the hedge marshal risked blowing up his own stomach so that the world would know the truth about ulcers. And if that isn't the most hardcore way to make history, I don't know what is.